work, I want people to think. I want them to create a narrative for what I've got going on in here. I have my own narrative, but I'm asking, and it's not a cop-out, I promise. Like for artists, say, well, what do you think? You know, I really am interested by what people think when they stand in front of my work and they're like, I think it's about this, and I'm like, that's way better than what I had going on. I'm going to borrow that, you know. So, you know, I started as a writer. I was in school for a long time. I started as a writer, then moved into printmaking, and then into painting, and then discovered photography as a means to make photographs so I didn't have to have people sit very long for painting, and then figured out that photography took a lot less time than the painting would. And so I just sort of took up the camera. Plus I loved the technology. There was a sort of fetishism to the camera that was just incredibly beautiful. But it quickly became apparent. I studied under the great Tom Neff. Hopefully most of you guys know Tom, and Michael Book and AJ Meek. And these guys, I was not going to be a view camera photographer. It was just not, I wasn't good at it, you know. So I started taking the way I treated painting, and I started using photography in much the same way. And I would build sets in my apartment, my little apartment with the wood floors, and photograph. And over time, I started to discover ways of building a different reality. A reality that you couldn't fit in my apartment. You know, a reality in a wasteland, or a reality where shit can get stuck in the ground. And over the past 10, 12 years, that's what I've been doing. It's utilizing technology in a way that allows me to sort of take any sketch that I can come up with, any idea that I can think of, and create an image that's as photographic as I can get it, so that it really sells the illusion as much as possible. And once again, back to Kelly's credit and all these, I was doing this in a traditional photo program, and everybody was like, keep going, let's see what happens here. This is pretty interesting. So that's where I ended up with these works here. There you go. Process, yeah, all right, that's one where I tell Jason, I was like, shh. So the process is digital. I design my own computer systems and build them myself actually to handle the workload. Most people kind of get this, but they don't know it. The only thing real in every photograph is the person. Everything else in the photograph is completely digital fiction. I travel a lot to capture the textures and things I need. I'm fortunate enough to have an endowed professorship that pays for my research travel. So for like this image right here, the Sept that God is Love is mounted on is at the Victoria and Albert Museum. And I started utilizing a new experimental technology that allows me to take about 300 photographs of the Sept from every angle and stitch it back together as a digital model that can be manipulated in space any way I want. And so literally everything in here, from the bricks to the ground to the sky, is completely digitally manufactured. So one of the things is, I have to take sort of all of my experience painting as a painter, all of my experience as a photographer, to make these things sort of feel like they're in place. But I don't want to push them so far that they look purely photographic. I love that painterly quality that still sort of exists in the piece. So they're a little bit of work. I started on these pieces a few years ago. So I'm looking at 6 to 8 months per piece usually, depending on if I have to travel to go do something with it, or how technically challenging it is at times. I know that doesn't answer the process question very well.
But you don't go too deep.
Yeah, no, you don't want to give it away. Yeah, also, it's not, I always tell people, it's not Photoshop. It's not Photoshop, so it's a combination.
You have photographs of images that you then play with?
No, so without getting too geeky on this, I'll tell you, so I use a digital modeling program. So it's the same programs they use to design, say, the Boeing 747 digitally, to see how it works and all the, I use the same software, but I decided to be an artist with it, and I build these things digitally from scratch. So imagine you start with a digital cube, and you just start to stretch it and pull it and shape it until it becomes the objects that you need, sort of one at a time. And the odd part is, up until 14 years ago, I didn't even own a computer. I refused. In fact, when Tom and them were saying you should switch to digital, that's the new thing, I was like, never. I won't. And then just 2 years later, once I saw the creative potential, And I have palette envy to this day, that's why I still paint. I love the process of making art, but in the end, for me, the final product, the way to tell the narrative that I wanted to tell, the psychological terrain I wanted to create, was more important than what I used to make it. I didn't want to fetishize process over the final image. So I kind of adopted this wholeheartedly, and I had to quickly learn to become a technologist. So, because the computers that I use for these, just buying them on the open market is not an option. So that started a whole new sort of realm for me. So at UL, in fact, I was professor of photography over there, and I ended up moving and taking over the new media and digital art department. So it pushed me in a completely new direction as an academic as well. But it's been very fruitful. There's nothing I can't think of that I can't make now. I can break any law of physics. I can put something suspended in midair. I run simulations, literally. I've learned to do that. If I need to shatter glass accurately. It all feels like, at first when you say it, it feels like a little bit of a cheat. Until you realize it takes about 8 months to do it. And then I started asking myself, why am I not just painting this? This would take me probably less time. But I don't think I'm that good of a painter, so there you have it.
Yeah, these to me are very cinematographic, but what influences your aesthetic? What, books, movies?
Absolutely. Books, movies, philosophy, theology. I love reading them. Modern events. You know, I never want to say that I'm making work about a social issue or a cause, because I feel those things shift so much. But the reality is, you know, I'm a citizen of this reality in this world, and a lot of this work came out of watching what was happening in Syria and places like that. These parts of the world that were literally falling apart, yet people were still trying to go about having some semblance of normalcy. And what I always tell, you know, I travel to these parts of the world, and I always tell people, I said, you know, they're just like us. They want their kids to go to school, wake up, eat breakfast, you know, and it's sort of the horrors of war, but at the same time, I start to write fictional narratives. So this is one called Mortal Engines that's based on a fictional place called Sarajevo that's into this war, and these are sort of the remnants and things are going on. The new government's taking over. So that's definitely inspired by reading a lot of literature over the years. And you know, you said cinema though. Yeah. I purposefully started to make these because I work in film as well. And this newer film that I'm working on is Mortal Engines as well. And I wanted them to look almost like these color stills with that same aspect.
That's kind of what the feeling, they're very dystopian.
Yeah. I don't make happy work. I've never been accused of making really happy work. And I hope I never will be. I'm a happy guy, believe me. That's why I get it all out here. You know? But yeah, there's always that sense to me of, and there's psychological. I study a lot of psychology. I'm interested by, everything's interesting to me. But all the subject matter ends up working its way into it.
That's right. You did have a cinematographic.
Yeah, we did. We had to hide it over there. Yeah.
All closed in.
There it is. So yeah, that all comes back. So yeah, there's another one coming. About 4 more years, I think we'll be finished.
Cool.
Jamie, you mentioned that in each of these, the only thing that's real, the only thing that's actually photographed is the person. Mm-hmm. Is that a technical decision? Is that because you can't create the human in your program as well, or is that a message-driven decision?
It's a little bit of, let's say it started out as a little bit of both. Now it's become, I need the people there for me. So that there's a warmth to a human that, in fact, in a lot of modern cinema with special effects, they can create, you know, these homunculi that look pretty realistically human. But there's always something missing. I still love the interaction with people in the studio because I get people who are good at acting. They're good at modeling. When I say, I need you to feel like this, you know, that's something I'm not even good at doing. So I couldn't manufacture that. This slight slump of the shoulders, somebody to give them like a motivation. That's where the human has to be there, you know. So that's definitely, it's both a technical consideration and an aesthetic consideration and sort of a humanist thing. I love getting in the studio with them and seeing what they give back because usually the scenes aren't built. I photograph the models first a lot of the time and they get into the scene and they start to influence what the energy's like in that space.
So you use reference images for, so for example, the sculpture there. You have reference images that you're using just to give you an idea of what it will look like as you're, just like I might do in my paintings, I'll take pictures of models and have reference images, and then from that, redraw it into something else.
Absolutely. This is actually the Louvre, which I teach in Paris over the summers. And so I'll go into the Louvre and take multiple angles and reference image, and then digitally resculpt this thing sort of from a blob, digital blob over time into that. The same thing for rooms. I go into, if I find rooms in like Berlin or London, these they're just different from American rooms. They're older. They have a different aesthetic to them. I'll photograph multiple angles. And that way, when I go to rebuild them digitally, I've got these reference images in there. And so I had to learn some architecture and things like that, which my architecture friends love. Because they think, I always joke the only difference, no, I'm not going to tell it. I was going to tell an architecture joke, but I don't want to offend any architects out there, because I love them. But they were like, oh, so you got to learn some architecture. It's like, yeah, look, I just need to know how tall the average Victorian window was. And then it becomes a 4-hour lecture on Victorian glazing. So you sit through it, but they're full of great information.
Well, I was just interested in the images. You have them all drawing butterflies. Okay, that's one question. And then what about the boxes on their heads?
That is a thing that I invented called, I call it a comptometer, which is an old office device from the turn of the century.
Like
probably.
programming of plans?
Well, all right, so I will say this. Each desk has a number, and the number is part of a Caesar cipher that I built into each box. So anybody who can solve the Caesar cipher, I've always joked, gets a free print. So the numbers and letters in the box, cross-referenced with the number on their desk, is the key to the Caesar cipher. And so it's just a fictional sort of machine I designed based on the Enigma machine, which the Germans used in World War II. And I kind of extrapolated from that, let my imagination go wild, and used a program called SolidWorks and some other programs to create an actual digital gearage system, because it was also in the foam and colonials, so that it worked, it actually worked. And I built in the little cipher to it. So.
And the butterflies?
Butterflies that's a symbol I'm not going to tell anybody. That has a little bit of an emotional thing for me. But suddenly, because I am writing a book about this, so it's going to be in there kind of as a little bit of a, it's a giveaway if I give it away now, but they're all they're receiving signals, coded signals, and they're supposed to inscribe everything, and suddenly they're all inscribing the same thing at one time. So think someone hacked their network.
Do the actual models have a point of reference? I mean, yes, you can augment the digital reality into another kind of reality, but do they have a point of reference, as in your head has something heavy on it, or in terms of their physics and their modeling? Do you instruct them of that, or is it such a creative process that by the start of it, it's so different by the end of it that it wouldn't matter anyway?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Sometimes we go in there and I do it just sort of naked. There's nothing in there, and I give them a little bit of directive. But a lot of times I build proxies. It might be as simple as a shoebox that we've got on their head so that shadows are cast properly and they do feel a little bit of weight. But I'll usually tell, and the worst things, I don't even show the models the sketch, usually. I kind of want them to go in there and just go with the verbal direction I'm giving them in positions and things like that. And I have to say, it's such a technical shoot usually, especially this one. We had to grid out a studio this size and grid it out and make sure we were moving the model down exactly the same distance each time, with the right horizon line and the right angles and all that. So by that point, by the end, she was just going, so I'm doing this again? I was like, yeah, it's perfect. Looks great. And you can sort of get this feeling sometimes. A lot of my models are actresses, so I'll say, as simple as what you said, there's something really heavy on here. Like, what am I doing? And they can take that and make it work. And any other implements are usually there just as technical implements to either do motion tracking or to get scale right.